Rain breathes against the mountain before the city hears it. A slow exhale through black leaves. A thousand fingertips upon tin. Until the roofs drown under the sound. At 4 a.m., the lights flicker along the spine of Sugarloaf Mountain, then die. The only glow is the soft green of radios and the colorin chips of cigarettes on veranda steps. Beyond, the sea is an unlit page. In Regent, on the eastern flank, a woman named Mariama squints at the seam where her ceiling meets the wall. The drip is steady, the bucket already half full. Her son, Alacine, sleeps with his feet against the door, as if he could hold the house closed with his small weight. The air is wet enough to drink. Somewhere above, under the ancient trees, something groans. Before the war, the mountain was a silhouette beyond the city. After the war, it was the city. Freetown's breathless growth clambered uphill in sheets of zinc and blocks of concrete, climbing into the last of the forest. The hills that once held the rain began to shed it. A road cuts through fern and termite mound. A quarry bites the slope. Footpaths unravel like stitches pulled too fast. On paper, the lines were clean. Joseph keeps a copy of those maps in his satchel, squinting letters. Red no-build zones cut around the green crown of the city. He's a planner with more ink than authority. He has asked questions in the kind of meetings that leave behind cold tea and nothing else. Tonight, he studies a message thread from a colleague at meteorology. The language is spare. Saturated soils, persistent rainfall, risk of slope failure. He hears it between the words. The mountain is tired. He pulls on boots and drives toward Regent. Headlights catch the sheet of rain like a closed curtain. The wipers can't keep up. The radio hiss is all storm until a voice surfaces, thin but steady. The way a fisherman knows the way by stars he cannot see. People of the western area, the announcer says, if you live near slopes, please move to safer ground. Do not sleep. Stay awake. In a single room behind a blue-painted door, a nurse named Kadiatu laces her shoes in the dark and leaves a note for her sister sleeping on the floor beside her two girls. Kanote Hospital will need her before dawn. She pushes into the rain, head down, and the city rushes overhead on the highway like a river in a gutter. Somewhere beyond, the mangrove creeks of Krube rise and spill and rise again. Intakwire Musa sits on an overturned bucket and listens to the mountain's sound, a language he pretends to understand. He learned the hum of the machines and the crack of blasted rock years ago. Learned to read the way water finds the simplest path. Tonight, the simplest path is everywhere at once. The storm has been coming each night now, like a habit. It has been raining, not in showers, but in sentences. He wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, gritty with dust that has turned to paste. When the rain is this heavy, roads become seams and then wounds. Open drains fill and overflow. Children play until they don't. In a house of poured cement beside a narrow lane, Mariama tucks her son under her arm and moves the bucket twice, then 3 times. Tin heaps up. The bucket will never be under the drip long enough. She can tell if the sound outside is thunder or the trucks down on the lower road, hauling gravel away from places that needed it more. On the radio, the voice changes. A man with a preacher's cadence. Stay awake, he says again and again, as if waking can keep a hill from moving. If you are near Regent, one of our team reports water rising from the ground itself. Joseph's phone. Veep, a message from a junior geologist. A picture of a crack running along a track he knows well. The ridge above Mortorme. The line looks like a new river. He tries to call back. Busy, he turns off the radio long enough to hear the rain as something like static on a field of sound. The road slides under his tires. Above the crack, under trees that stood before the first road. The ground is a slow machine. The brown water in the soil finds each other. It gathers, it presses against roots and stone. And the hill, which seemed a single thing, reveals itself as pieces. Somewhere, a boulder shifts a little in its long bed. Somewhere else, a beam of concrete flexes under a weight it did not expect. In the city's cold rooms, servers hum. The Office of National Security sends a text. The words lose urgency in the rain. Down in Krube, someone ties a boat to a door frame and prays a rain prayer, learned from a mother, who learned it from a mother. In a hillside house in Mortorm, a young man sleeps through the storm for the first time in days. He has been moving sandbags until his palms bled like mouths. His father told him the storm will soon pass. Everyone says storms pass. Mariama's phone lights up, then goes dead. She taps it. No response. She thinks of the orange plastic seller who came up the hill last week with torches. How she haggled with him over a few notes and decided to wait for a cheaper price. She thinks of everything she decided to wait for. She thinks of a mango tree her grandmother planted near Kabbalah, a tree that would never fall because it knew the earth better than the new things know it. At 6:59 a.m., the rain crescendos into something else. A sound, like teeth breaking, like a box of plates dropped down a stairwell. Like the ground bursting with laughter at the idea that it is fixed and will always hold us. Intequairi Musa stands and listens. In the car, Joseph brakes and feels the earth shift slightly under the tires. In her bed, Mariama grips Alicine and waits for whatever the sound means. The mountain exhales again, not with rain, but with movement. The black line in the earth becomes a mouth. It opens. A wall of earth stands up and walks. It is not mud at first, but a body of trees and stones, and the ribs of houses. Racing lower in a language older than streets, it starts at the ridge and gathers all that is not anchored to bedrock. Soil like soaked bread, bamboo whips, sheets of zinc that lift and slice, the red water from 1,000 small channels, becoming one. The front of it rolls like an animal. Above the roar, there is only one more sound. A whistling like breath, leaving something larger than lungs. Mariama has time to feel the floor tilt, to see the Timoks tremble, to pull her son beneath the table, because that is what you do in this country when things shake. She has time to say his name once. The door tears open inward. The room lifts. The table becomes a boat. The far wall rises up like a wave. The kitchen window explodes. Water fills the doorway like cloth, and then the house is not a house, but a suitcase being shaken until all the things inside find their place on the road. Outside, the lane is gone. Outside, everything is a slope. A neighbor's shout becomes a streak of sound through which boats fall. Someone is carried past with their arms outstretched, fingers working, as if to swim, but there is nothing to hold. The brown is not water. It is the mountain in a new shape. Joseph's windshield blooms with mud, and he cannot see above or beyond. He stops and hears the deep grind of stones on stones, like a mill, like a machine he does not recognize. And then he recognizes it and realizes he has been planning against it on paper for a decade. While the hillside arranged itself for the moment when the paper would not matter, he pulls the door open and steps into water up to his calves. It is warm. It moves with purpose. He tries to call the Office of National Security. No call. He tries the radio and hears nothing but an open line. The breath of a room where a microphone waits for a voice. He slips once, and his hand finds the rough edge of a culvert. A motorbike. Upside down. Pinwheels past. The rider's helmet follows. Empty. Intiquari Musa is already running. He doesn't think of what to bring or leave except his legs. He runs along the contour. He knows to where a makeshift path leads down to mortar mess lower houses. The rain is a sheet, but above it he sees a stripe of naked earth where the slope has been shaved clean of its skin. It is wider than anything he's seen. On the course, the sea moves as if pulled by the hill's fall. In Krube, boatmen shout to one another. In the hospital, Kadiatu is handed a roll of black plastic and told to be ready to receive. Her training in care bends now into something else. The accounting of loss. In the mortuary fridge at Konot, the lights flicker again. The smell of bleach gives up its work. At the radio, the announcer waits for confirmation before he uses the word he knows by heart but has never said on air with the tremor now in his jaw. Landslide. He finally says into the microphone, the syllables heavy with water. He remembers mudslides in other countries, far places on television. He never thought of this mountain as something that would move. He presses a finger against the cough button and chokes once, then returns, voice steady. If you are near Regent, leave the slope. Go to higher ground. Stay with neighbors who are safe. We need all hands. On the hill, hands appear as if cold. Shovels appear, picks, buckets. The first to stop the flow are boulders jammed against mango trunks. The slide carves a valley where none was. It yawns wider, eats an entire row of houses, and from the mouths of those houses comes furniture and children and sacks of rice. The edges of the flow are thinner, less certain, and there is lace their clothing, torn mosquito nets, the lip of a corrugated sheet. People gather at the new edge, where the ground is firm. They watch for a glimpse of a face they know. They call names into the brown. The sound is small against the slide's voice. Someone reaches with a plank toward a woman caught against a broken wall. She takes the plank and is pulled forward 2 steps. Then the mudward's tug returns and she is gone. The plank floats, useless, until it catches on something and stays. And the man holding it keeps holding it as if he still holds her. Time is elastic here, stretched between 2 hands. Joseph scrambles up a set of wet rock steps chiseled into the slope years ago when someone decided to build a house where a goat once grazed. He looks down and sees that house roped by a dead palm. In the corner of his mind, where the official lives, he hears the echo of meetings where men spoke of enforcement as if it were a thing you can put on like a hat. His other mind, the human one, remembers a woman at a counter with a child on her hip, asking where she should live if not here. He has no answer as he reaches the lip of the new scar. The scar is raw. It glistens like meat. It curves in a way he knows means the slide has more to give. He turns to the men around him, uncoiling ropes, and shouts for them to stay back. His voice is just one voice. People step forward anyway, driven by names that do not belong to maps. The rain slackens, then intensifies again. The slide's tail swirls into the road. Cars trying to climb out of regions stop and reverse and stall. The sound of horns becomes a desperate kind of punctuation in a sentence that will not end. Over the sound, a child cries. Mariama hears it and cannot tell if it is her son's voice or another small life. She tries to speak. Mud fills her mouth and she coughs it out and breathes. She does not fill her lungs completely because she is inside of something that does not want her to. Light is a seam above. She waves and feels nothing above her hands but water. In the city center, the Office of National Security's director takes 3 calls at once. The phrases are broken and then sharpened by decision. Deploy military. Deploy excavators. Coordinate with Red Cross. Call morgue capacity. Establish a staging area. He writes the words on a pad, knowing he may not have enough of any of them. Freetown's capacity is a shallow bowl. It overflows quickly. It collapses if you put heavy things in it. At Connaught, Kadiatu ties a mask over her face, the elastic sharp against her ears. She prepares a table. A body bag is unrolled. The first bodies arrive not by ambulance, but by the backs of trucks and the arms of neighbors. They are coated in the mountain's red. She whispers a prayer under her breath. Not to keep her hands steady, they are steady, but to keep her mind from rising and looking down and seeing all of this at once. The radio's phone lines light with calls. People list names. The announcer becomes a ledger. Mariama, from Mortorme. Alicine, 10. Wearing a yellow shirt, a mother with cornrows and a scar on her left hand. Ibrahim, from below the quarry, missing. Names stack into a tower that will not stand. A man arrives at the station dripping mud and asks to speak. He speaks as if to a courtroom. He says there were letters warning of the slope. He says there were permits issued anyway. He says the rain is not politics, but where the rain goes is on the hill. The slide slows, then surges again with a jolt that shakes the palms. The ground where Joseph stands ripples underfoot. He leaps back and drags 2 men with him. One looks at him with a kind of anger that is mostly grief. The other looks past him and laughs once, then clamps his mouth shut. Laughter is a kind of breath, too. There is a moment, 1 heartbeat, when the rain softens into a mist and the city holds itself very still, as if listening for a verdict. In that moment, the sound like a sigh comes from above. The upper slope peels away in sheets. The second wave is not as broad as the first, but it arrives with a sharp edge, cutting through the veneer that those below had begun to call safety. It lifts the field of rescue, the buckets, the ropes, the human chain, and scrambles them as if to force a restart from a place more honest about the scale. Men leap to the side. A woman grabbing at a child's shoe loses her grip on the whole child instead. The shoe comes away in her hand, small and clean. She holds it against her chest like a talisman. It becomes her anchor in the noise. Mariama's swelled narrows to the space between her face and the mud. To live here, she must make a cave with her mouth. The dark presses. Above her, a log skitters and stops. It changes the shape of the pressure. Air threads through. She turns her head a fraction and something floats past her cheek. A ribbon from her hair, the yellow one Alicine likes. She bites down against the urge to call his name and draw mud into herself. Joseph slides to his knees at the edge of the new lip. He sees, impossibly, the curved shape of a table a few meters down. The table is turned like a shield against the flow. Under it, a shape presses, and stills, and presses again. He cannot know who lives under it, but he reaches anyway. He lies flat on the wet earth and extends his arm until his shoulder cries. His fingers brush the table leg. It is slick. He licks his lips and tastes silt. Rope, he shouts without turning his head. Tie my waist. A man with a frayed length of clothesline binds him, knotting fast with hands that know boats. Another wraps it twice more, as if a city official could be kept by rope where law could not keep him on safer ground. They lower him a meter, and another. The earth trembles as the slide's lower run chews the last of a house's foundation. He feels every brick fall through his chest. The table shifts. Under it, a pair of fingers dig toward the thin edge of air and find Joseph's. He grips them and feels a human pulse. He doesn't think. He thinks only of not letting that pulse become an absence. The men above pull. Joseph adds his legs to the climb and the table moves with them, a stubborn hinge against the flow. At the last, the table jerks away and the hand with it, and they spill together onto the new ground. Joseph on his back, the other body heaving. Slick eyes, closed, small chest shuddering. The world comes roaring back into sound. He wipes mud from a small face. It isn't a boy. It is a girl, no older than 5. She coughs once, twice, and opens her eyes like a bird. Where is your mother? Joseph asks, and the question is too large to fit in her world. She points downward into the brown. Kadiatu's hands are now a metronome, steady, useful, in a room that is too small for this. The morgue's cold space fills by 9 in the morning. The chemical smell mixes with the meat metal of blood and soil and rain. Names are written on tags. Sometimes there is a ring, sometimes a scar, sometimes only a guess, and a prayer tied to a number. A man wears a shirt with a footballer's name. A woman's nails are painted, the polish glittering inexplicably clean. A municipal superintendent arrives at the hospital door with a list of temporary relocation points. A school up the hill, a church with a high floor, a community center by the cemetery. The school's headmistress has already opened the gates. Women arrive there with children who do not stop shaking. A man arrives, carrying a goat. He ties the goat in a corner with a polite apology and sits on the floor, his face a carefully folded cloth. At that radio, the announcer turns his microphone off between calls and lays his head briefly on the desk. He has worked through the war, through Ebola, through the long weeks when every call was a report of heat and thirst. He cannot remember one like this, where the perimeter of the city itself is undone. He returns to the microphone and reads what the Office of National Security hands him. Avoid Regent Road. Donors delivered to the stadium. Water points opening. He reads like a man placing stepping stones in a river he can barely see. Intiquare Musa and others now work as rescuers. He knows the way the rock broke, knows what the slide took. He kneels in front of a hole, hears breathing, shouts, and 2 boys pull at a corrugated sheet. They lift a man out. The man clutches a plastic bag with money he saved to buy a plot further up the hill. The bag is torn. The bills bleed, die. A line of soldiers arrives with a bulldozer. The first push into the debris is a sacrilege to some and a relief to others. The blade bites into the heap and curls a lip of red aside. There is a cheer when the machine moves a slab that men could not. There is a groan when it pushes aside something that might have contained a life. The machine has no respect for maybes. Its noise drowns the prayer of a woman holding a photograph. By noon, the sky is still the color of a bruise. The rain, after a morning without pause, lessens as if to allow the city to see what it has become. The scar on Sugarloaf is a wound you can see from downtown. People stop in the open and look up, umbrellas tilting, and you can tell by the angle of their necks who is thinking of a loved one up there and who is thinking of law and who is thinking of God and who is thinking of the price of cement. Government ministers arrive and stand at a distance in boots to clean to be believed. Their faces are the politely arranged faces of officials everywhere. They are not monsters. They are men and women who, under a different sky, might have been planners like Joseph, nurses like Katia. They say the right sentence. We will do everything. They add the sentence. They always add. Now is not the time for blame. Standing near a woman with mud to her elbows, mutters into her palm. If not now, when? Bodies are laid at a football field under a plastic tarp. The Red Cross erects a tent. A team arrives that knows how to find the living by sound. They turn the engines off, and the city holds its breath again, listening for a voice, for a tapping beneath the mountain's new skin. Somewhere, faint, there is knocking. The team goes there like hounds to a scent. Time becomes a rope pulled hand over hand in a straight line you could pluck like an instrument. At the school on higher ground, the children draw what they saw. They draw brown rivers with houses in them. They draw trees without leaves. One child draws a big mouth that eats little houses. The headmistress tapes the drawings to a wall with a strip of clear tape. The tape will fail in the humid air, but for now it holds. Joseph hears the talk begin beneath the shouting. The talk of cause. A man says quarry. A woman says illegal. Another says everything is illegal when you are poor. A politician says climate change, like a foreign word he has learned to pronounce. Someone else says trees. A plan from 5 years ago to plant a green belt around the city is pulled from a drawer like a dress for a funeral. People argue whether it would have mattered if the dress had been placed on in time. Inte klinika diatu. Takes a moment behind the Davida to drink water. She sits on a stool and watches a drop of blood on her knuckles spread and stop, held by surface tension. As if even blood is trying to hold itself together today. Her phone buzzes with a message from her sister. The girls are safe. They're asking for you. She writes back a poundful of emojis and breathes twice, 3 times, then stands and goes back through the vinyl curtain as a truck pulls up at the front with the next load. Near sunset. If sunset were a thing the clouds permitted, a murmur ripples through the crowd at Regent. A list is being compiled. Names of the dead. The list is a first draft that will be revised so many times that it becomes a palimpsest. A text written over another. The list is not final. The list does not know the number yet. But, someone says, more than 1,000. The word leaves his mouth and hangs in the moist air like a mist that becomes rain again. Joseph stands with the rope coiled now at his feet and looks at the scar until his eyes water. He thinks of every meeting where he was told to be patient. He thinks of red lines on a map crossing green hills on paper that did not feel the weight of the rain. He thinks of a child's fingers finding his... He thinks of the lower neighborhoods facing the sea and the water that will come from above when the hills no longer drink. He thinks of how the city is 2 hands reaching toward each other. One hand building and one hand trying to hold back what building breaks. He pulls out his phone, mudslick, and opens a message to his colleagues. There is no time for careful words. He writes, simply, we have to say it, out loud. He adds a picture of the gash on the hill, and the little girl's face glimpsed at the edge of the frame like a future peering over a wall. The phone pings with replies even as a new sound begins. Not thunder, not the slide, but a siren rising and falling, the kind that calls a city to attention and then leaves it waiting for instructions that come late, or not. The siren is not a single thing. It bleeds into the voices of men yelling to clear the road, into the calls of women for water, into the sudden roar of a generator as someone tries to carve power from emptiness. The bulldozer backs up and its piercing beep becomes a metronome for panic. Soldiers move a cordon line back until someone laughs bitterly and says, back to where? We live on the edge. A fresh warning comes through the radio. The storm system that fed the mountain has not yet quit the peninsula. More rain tonight, perhaps worse. Evacuate beyond the old cemetery. Avoid the gullies. Report. Cracks. In the camps, a school, a church, a half-built market hall with iron bones. The displaced unfold their wet belongings and lay them like offerings on the floor. Damped mattresses, a pot with a dent like a thumbprint, a Bible bulging with water. Someone begins a pot of cassava on a stove that hisses and complains. Children who have learned to be still are now learning again how to swarm. Their games turn the camp aisles into runways and then into nets that catch the older ones in small moments of laughter that feel like oxygen. At the stadium, 8 trucks nose through a gate. Tarpaulins, water drums, sacks of rice, with logos and languages that would be at home on the ships in the harbor. Volunteers slide boxers down a chain of arms. Fatmata, a Red Cross volunteer who learned to wrap a bandage in a week that taught the country to fear touch, now teaches a woman how to collect safe water without contaminating the bucket. Hold the ladle like this, she says gently, and the woman does, and a small dignity returns. Connotes Morgue cannot say yes to any more. The decision ripples outward from the hospital, to the ministry, to the cemetery, where men with shovels stand at Waterloo and look at a field that will become, by necessity, larger than it should be. There is talk of a mass burial. There is anger at the words, even as the reality demands them. There is a sense in the air. We've been through rituals of loss too recently to invent new ones now. But the old ones are not elastic enough to hold this many at once. Joseph stands before microphones made from paper clips and improvised stands at a press briefing under a tent. He did not plan to stand here. But the director of the Office of National Security is already 3 fires away, and someone needs to say the thing out loud, to put sound to what the city knows in its bones. He speaks without preamble. This is not only rain, he says. This is land use. This is deforestation. This is building in waterways. This is the price of permits traded in corridors. This is climate shifting, the ground under us. Yes, but we greased the slope. A murmur through the tent. A minister's eyes narrow. A camera light flares. Joseph continues. He names the plan that stalled. He names the red lines on the map. He says, the uncomfortable. Relocate or count the dead again. He does not offer the easy comfort of a never again because he knows how water is patient and bureaucracy is patient in a different way. Someone will call him reckless. Someone else will call him brave. He does not care right now what the word for him is. He looks beyond the tent at the wound on the hill and speaks to that. In the school camp, Mariama sits upright, bandaged, a blanket around her shoulders. It smells of plastic. Her hair is plastered to her face. She barely survived the weight of the mountain because of a table and 2 hands and a rope. Her son is not with her. She knows this not because anyone told her in clear words, but because her body knows the absence of a weight it carried every day for years. People speak gentle sentences that circle the hole. We will keep searching. Children sometimes make it. The list is not final. She nods to save their faces. On a stage in front of the stadium, the announcer is now a coordinator, holding a list of supplies and a megaphone. He calls for gloves, for masks, for chlorine. He calls for men with strong backs and women with steady hands and children who can sit and draw and be a reminder that there is. The next morning, he calls for people to keep their distance from the heavy machines. He sees a woman arguing with a soldier. He steps off the stage and mediates. And for a moment the 3 of them erase the line between state and citizen the way people do after earthquakes, floods, wars. They talk about water and food and a sleeping space the width of a blanket. Afternoon slips toward evening as the sky shifts from bruised to iron. The forecast is right. A wall of rain reappears, a dark edge over the sea. The city tenses its shoulders. Those still on slopes lower than Regent, in Dwerzik, in Kaningo, in Congo Town, feel the language of the hillside through the soles of their feet. They watch their drains, as if the drains might speak. The sound of doors being closed is a rhythm. People check their roofs, tucking bricks back onto sheets of zinc like stitches through skin. A man who swore never to leave his house again pulls a padlock through a tin hasp and joins the flow downhill to the church hall. A call goes out on WhatsApp groups for volunteers to knock on doors, to go street by street and invite people out of their homes with the insistence of friends. They go, because this is how cities work when the official channels are thin. A human network thickens in their place. Floodlights snap on in the disaster zone, tall and yellow and inadequate. They throw hard shadows. Digging continues. The excavator purrs and leans. Someone finds a dog alive under a piece of roofing, and there is a laugh that arrives without permission. The kind of laugh that collapses into a sob if you look at it too directly. A man with a megaphone announces the names of those found alive. The list is short enough to memorize. People memorize it like a prayer. Onder atenta team from the Meteorological Service unrolls maps printed on cheap paper. The topographic lines knot into hills. The red areas swell like bruises. One of them traces with a finger the line of a new crack reported above another community. Here, she says, and here. She makes calls. Some go through. Some do not. The rain that is coming ties every loose thing down with string you cannot see. Night arrives early and steep. The rain comes with it, in sheets angled like swords. The sound on the camp's roof drowns conversation. Children cover their ears. A woman hums a song known for weddings. It stands in thin defiance against dissolution. The goat bleats once and quiets. On the hill, the second slope, not the one that has fallen, but its neighbor, begins to sweat. The cut trees above, felled months ago to make way for a view, weep sap that mixes with the rain. A crack appears along a line that a boy could place his foot into. He does. He calls his father. The father calls the number on the paper handed out earlier. The line is busy. Joseph stands at the edge again, water pooling in his boots, and feels the fringe of a system trying to hold. Volunteers working as if they will be paid by sleep later. Soldiers sweating under a canvas rain. A nurse visible under a lamp juggling two phones. A woman, a mother, sitting on a plastic chair with her blanket pulled up, staring at a fixed point in the air where she can see a different morning if she refuses to blink. He thinks of years from now, when people will point to this gash and call it by the year, not by the names of those it took. He wants the year to stick like a burr to policy. He wants it not to wash away in the next rain. The rain doesn't ask him what he wants. Somewhere uphill, a tree's roots squeal as they tear. A new noise threads the dark. The whisper of soil moving under itself. Tiny grains beginning the work that will, if allowed, become another wall of earth. A volunteer with a headlamp hears it and shines his beam along the slope. The light falls on a seam that was not there an hour ago. There is a breathless second where no one decides and everyone waits for someone to tell him where to stand. Out, someone yells. And the word travels faster than the rain. The trench of people around the scar clears as if drawn backward by a string. Ropes are dropped. The excavator swings away, its operator not waiting for orders. Soldiers shove civilians toward the floodlight's rear edge. The headlamp flickers over the new crack, and the crack becomes a mouth. Not the yawning jaw of Sugarloaf's first collapse, but a smaller, meaner bite, aimed directly at those who have been brave all day. The second slide comes in a rush, an insult added to an injury. It strips a narrow channel down a neighbor's slope, and slaps into the older debris with a soggy thud, knocking aside the careful piles people had made, swallowing a stack of buckets, pouring around a boulder that has not moved in a century. It is quick enough to terrorize, small enough to spare. A man at the edge loses his footing and is grabbed by two others, boots skidding, mud slaps, shins. It is over as soon as it begins. The floodlight hum rises as if to fill the silence. The rain keeps its drum. The city exhales, a collective owe not at the power of nature as a poetic thing, but at the immediacy, the proximity. The lesson is not the old one written in curricula. It is a sensation in the legs. We are always one soaked hillside away. The night stretches into a long hour. The list of found alive lengthens by a thread, unbelievably, as pockets of air give up small gifts. A boy emerges wrapped in wires and a curtain. A man is lifted, wrists first, eyes wide, mouth a dark O, but the longer hour is the other list. Its slow accrual, without verbs, just names, tags, numbers. In the camp, Mariama goes to the edge of the doorway and stares uphill. She has not cried yet. The cry will come when it is alone with her in a very small room inside her chest. For now, she sits with the women who know the geography of grief and maps it silently, hand to back, shoulder to shoulder. Morning brings a sky-washed pallor and an air that smells like wet iron. The mountain is no less raw with the light. Helicopters buzz over the peninsula, the sound like insects. News crews fan out and take the same image from slightly different angles. The red wound, the broken houses, the line of figures moving like ants. The numbers congeal into a single phrase that will travel far, more than 1,000 lives. The government names a week of mourning. Flags hang wet. At Waterloo Cemetery, men in rubber boots stand in a line, and the line is a story no one wanted to tell. The pits are cut wider than a door and deeper than a man's shoulders. There is a method to this, too. A grim choreography learned during Ebola and repurposed here. Protective gear, prayer set into the wind. Care taken with the names, the recording of location against a grid. We are careful with our dead, even when the scalar fuses individual tenderness. Women wail into scarves. A minister's voice shakes on the first sentence and steadies by the third. The days begin to sort themselves. Rescue yields to recovery. Digging yields to shoring and clearing. The Office of National Security issues a map with red zones hatched like the backed-out answer to an equation. Evacuation orders move beyond paper. Tapes go up around slopes that have always been someone's neighborhood. Houses that survived on the knife edge are marked X. The politics arrive with their entourage, but they are not entirely cynical. Funds are freed. A commission is announced. They are late. Yes, as rain always is when you need it, and right on time when you do not. Joseph finds himself in rooms that feel familiar and new at once. The meetings still have cold tea, but now the maps are spread with urgency. And when he says, "Greenbelt people do not nod politely and move on," he convenes with colleagues and community leaders, and they make a promise that is not a slogan. To draw lines that hold. At the community school, psychosocial teams with clipboards sit on low benches with children and ask them to tell stories of the mountain. The drawings on the wall curl at the edges and fall. New ones replace them. The same mouths, the same brown rivers, but now with bridges drawn in, with trees drawn back on the slopes. It is not fanciful. It is planning rendered with crayons. Kadiatu goes home one night after 3 without sleep. Her sister puts a bowl of rice and sauce in her lap and takes the girls to the neighbors so she can be alone. She sits with a spoon in her hand and does not lift it, and then she does, and eats, and halfway through the bowl, realizes she is crying and cannot determine whether she is sad or relieved that she can still swallow. She lies down on the floor where the air is cooler and watches the ceiling and thinks of the line of black bags and the line of white sheets and the line of women at the camp handing babies from arm to arm to arm. She falls asleep with her shoes on. The radio becomes a bulletin board for more than names now. A call for volunteers to replant a bare slope. An engineer explaining how a small retaining wall can channel a torrent without becoming a weapon. A weather officer describing how to read the sky in months to come. The announcer's voice, hoarse, carries a new thread in its timbre, a sensei of weaken. If not, we will. People are tired of will. Ken is a muscle. Law follows slowly, as always. Notices go out to clear waterways choked by litter and by houses, the city allowed to grow like coral and concrete. Bulldozers move along creeks and are met with resistance and grief. Resettlement sites become their own slow-motion storm. Where? Who pays? What title? A woman stands before her house with an X on it and says, simply, "Tell me where to go." The answer is never clean because the city grew through necessity and desire and neglect braided together. Untying that knot is the hardest work the state will do. But certain things newcomers to the city can see now too. Even in their first week, the shade thrown by surviving trees feels like protection. The concrete's glare feels like a dare. In neighborhoods like Kaningo and Dworzak, community groups are formed, women at the head, who walk the gullies after rain and take pictures of cracks and WhatsApp them to a number that now always answers. It is a small miracle. The line is staffed. The narrative from beyond Sierra Leone arrives, as it always does, with the speed and imprecision of the outside looking in. Headlines call Sugar Loaf a tragedy, a wake-up call, a lesson. They place Regent in the company of other names. Rio's hillsides after rain, Caracas Vargas tragedy, the edges of Manila each monsoon. The kampuns of Jakarta, sinking as it pumps water from the ground. The low-lying lanes of Lagos where the lagoon floods climb one brick higher each year. In all these places, cities have hurried, tripped, gotten up, hurried again. In all these places, the boundaries between safe and not safe blur in the face of 1,000 daily decisions. To pay a bribe, to build one more room, to cut a tree for cooking fuel, to throw a bag into a drain because the dump truck never came. If there is a single truth that will hold after Sugarloaf, it may be this. Disaster is rarely a surprise if you know where to look. The surprise is in the timing, not the place, and the work is not in the siren and the bulldozer, but in the years before them, in cups of tea, where someone points at a map and is not asked to be patient, in budgets that prefer drains to monuments, in permits that are only permits, and forests left standing on hills not because they're beautiful, but because they hold soil like good hands, in honest names put to hazard maps that are not tucked into drawers, in housing that costs what the city can pay without interest charged in lives. On the mountain, after the first month, men with saplings walk in a line and split the red wound into small pockets of hope. They push their fingers into the wet ground and widen the holes with the tenderness you would afford a child's shoe. They place the trees in and firm the soil around them. They tie the thin trunks to sticks with soft cloth. It looks absurdly small against the scar. It is how everything begins. At this school, Mariama folds a blanket and lays it on the bed assigned to a new family just arrived from a lower slope made dangerous by cracks. She has begun to sleep in a back room at a cousin's house in a neighborhood the water barely touches. She walks up the hill each morning to help in the camp. Some days she moves in silence, the hole inside her a weight that makes her precise. Some days she tells another mother where to find soap, and their hands touch, and they hold for a second longer than necessary because the body wants at least one thing it didn't have to ask for. Joseph stands on a platform a year later under a tree that survived and opens a binder with a plan printed on it. The plan is not perfect. Nothing is. But it is printed, and it is public, and people are pointing at it not with hope as a feeling, but with hope as a schedule. Green lines hold around the hills. Red hatches touch only places that can bear them. The budget is ugly, but real. He looks up at the scar, greener now in patches, and thinks of the little girl he pulled from under a table, and wonders if she still points uphill when someone asks her where home is. Kadiatu walks along the hospital corridor and hears laughter from a pediatric room and pauses because laughter still surprises her here. She peeks in. Someone has brought balloons. Someone else has balanced a radio on the sill. It plays the song that was popular the summer the mountain moved, and for a moment the past and the present overlay each other like two images you can blink between the street of mud and the room of light. She smiles without noticing she is doing it. The mountain remains. The clouds continue their work. The city wakes to rain and queens and sirens and market calls and seagulls. Some nights, the power is a rumor. Some days, the tap runs clear and people cheer as if it were a parade. Sugarloaf keeps its secret language. People below keep learning how to hear the first syllables before the words. When cities expand too fast, the edge between urgency and danger blurs. The price is written in clay and names. But there is also another rhythm. The way hands reach for hands when the ground gives way. The way a radio stays on through a storm. The way a goat ties a camp together with its low complaint. The way a plan stops being a paper and turns into a slope not built on. A tree not felled. A drain cleared before the monsoon arrives. More than 1,000 were buried after that August morning. Thousands more moved, reluctantly, to safer ground. The wound on the mountain greened its scabs. Permits changed. Drains were dug. Camps emptied into new neighborhoods. Not enough. Never enough. But more than before. The next rain came, and the city listened more closely than it ever had. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more true events that changed the world.